Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1.
The thinking atheist. It's not a person. It's a symbol. An idea.
The population of atheists in this country is going through the roof.
Rejecting faith. Pursuing knowledge. Challenging the sacred.
If I tell the truth, it's because I tell the truth. Not because I put my hand on a book and made a wish.
And working together for a more rational world.
Take the risk of thinking for yourself. Much more happiness, truth, beauty, and wisdom will come to you that way.
Assume nothing. Question everything. And start thinking. This is the Thinking Atheist Podcast. Hosted by Seth Andrews.
We often hear about how even the best people have a dark side. You know, if you used to watch Dexter, he was always talking about his dark passenger. And it's interesting to get into the civilized person, you know, to look behind the curtain to explore and understand what might be behind this civilization. Professor Daniel Breyer has a series at the Great Courses Plus. It's called Understanding the Dark Side of Human Nature. And he gets into stuff like evil, not just the religious versions, the supernatural versions, but talking about evil in terms of actions and reactions, the very dark sides of the human condition. Does this serve us in some way? Fascinating stuff. Just one of thousands of lectures at the Great Courses Plus, a resource for learning that makes every day a discovery. Sharpen your perspective, learn a skill, enhance your understanding with lectures that stream right to you on virtually any topic that you can imagine. Or watch or listen anytime with the Great Courses app. It's awesome. Not just information, but good information provided by the best professors in the world. And right now, they're offering my listeners a fantastic offer, an all-access trial for free. To get this great offer, sign up today through my exclusive URL. Do not wait. Sign up at thegreatcoursesplus.com/Seth. That's thegreatcoursesplus.com/Seth. I've been hooked on a television show called The Handmaid's Tale that broadcast on HULU. Just finished season 3. The Handmaid's Tale is based on a book. In 1985, Canadian author Margaret Atwood released a novel that essentially set the public imagination on fire. This is not hyperbole. And the story was a very interesting story, kind of a 1984-ish dystopian fiction that was loaded with social commentary about religion, about gender roles, oppression, power, government, corruption, and how an entire society can be poisoned to accept a totalitarian theocracy that puts men in charge and it strips women of almost all of their rights, especially reproductive rights. And it justifies torture and murder using Bible verses and all of this lofty language about unrighteousness. It's all done in the name of God, which makes it all the more terrifying. Now, there will inevitably be spoilers in this conversation in regard to the book and regard to the HULU television series. Spoiler alert. All right, I don't know how else to say it. I can't say it more emphatically. If you intend to watch the show and you want to be surprised, come back to this broadcast later, because it's impossible to get into the context of The Handmaid's Tale without talking about some of the shit that's actually happening. If you have no intention of watching it, cool. You will still, I think, find it a compelling and interesting story, and I'm going to give you the basic plot that's in place, the framework for the story, so you can follow along, okay? Margaret Atwood is a Harvard graduate. She's a Canadian poet. She's a novelist born in 1939. She has a wiki page that has her credits, including 17 different poetry books. She's got 16 different novels, 10 nonfiction books. She has written 8 children's books and a graphic novel, and those aren't even all of her contributions. And a lot of her work focuses on gender roles and identity, religion, power politics. The Handmaid's Tale released in the mid-'80s to critical acclaim. It won the Arthur C. Clarke Award. She calls the story speculative fiction. A radical group called the Sons of Jacob stages an attack on the existing government of the United States. And the president and most of the members of Congress are killed. It's a coup. Okay, and this new leadership suspends the United States Constitution. It shuts down the free press. It creates a military dictatorship, and it renames the United States the Republic of Gilead. Now, of course, Gilead refers to that area of land near the West Bank adjacent to the Dead Sea. It is holy ground. The Republic of Gilead is what they called it. And that's where they borrowed the name. Now imagine a government, a modern day government based on the literal verses of the Old Testament. This is just terrifying. Women are subjugated, gays are executed, decisions rest only with the men, claiming God's authority. Guards walk the streets with automatic weapons. They've got dogs. Black vehicles are out patrolling the streets, these intimidating, SUVs with police lights on them. The government offices look like houses of worship. They look like military temples, if there is such a thing. The Washington Monument has been altered, so it's now a huge cross. It's a massive religious symbol right there at the National Mall. There are public executions, especially a place called the Wall, where people who do not obey, people who are subversive to the system, they don't line up, they don't toe the line, they don't conduct themselves according to the law of Gilead, they are executed, and then their bodies hang on the wall as an example to everybody else, and people have to walk by these swinging bodies hanging on the wall. The message is very clear. If you disobey, you're going to end up on the wall. So obey the rules, toe the line, shut your mouth, do what we say or else. Men pull the strings. Women can't own property. They can't handle money. They can't read. They can't write. If you get caught reading a book, especially aloud, there's a very good chance they're going to amputate one of your fingers. And that's just to start. That's for the first offense, I think. There's a strict dress code for each of the classes of people, and there's a strictly enforced class system. Commanders are the men, these high-up men dressed in ominous black suits. I mean, not all men are commanders. The elite men are commanders, those in charge, those who would be considered the inner circles of power. They have these ominous black suits and have religious symbols on them. Commanders' wives wear blue always. It's kind of a blue-green. The Marthas wear green. They're the cooks. They call them the Marthas. They cook and tend to the house. They're essentially house slaves or housemaids. The young unmarried girls wear white, and in the long red dresses with white veils around their faces, there are the handmaids. The handmaids are assigned the duty of bearing the children. They are some of the few remaining fertile women left on Earth or in the United States. This is something they have done to try to further the human race. Because there are so few women who are fertile and there is an international crisis, the solution for Gilead has been to find the fertile women, strip them of their rights, essentially turn them into baby-making machines, and assign them to commanders to be impregnated. The epidemic of the barren womb requires this. Doesn't matter if they were housewives before in their previous lives, or they were neurosurgeons, or lawyers, or accountants, or whatever they were. Those lives are erased. You are now a handmaid. You have one single purpose, that is to get pregnant. Continue the human race in the name of Gilead. When the commander takes a handmaid into his house, the handmaid assumes his name. If his name is David, the handmaid assumes the title or the moniker, the name of David. If the commander is Thomas, you're of Thomas. If you're Fred, like our main commander in the original first two seasons especially, you're off Fred. Of Fred. You have no identity of your own. It is linked directly to the commander. You are the shadow of the commander. You are at the will and mercy and pleasure of the commander to bear the commander's child. The ceremony to get the handmaid pregnant is chilling to watch. It is essentially a religious ceremony. I have to talk about it so you'll get the full picture of this terrible future. It's that time of the month when the handmaid is most fertile, okay? Her identity totally stripped away. She walks in to the ceremony room. She sees a small pillow on the floor. She kneels on the pillow in deference. The Marthas are there in the room to receive her, and the commander and his wife enter from a separate door. He quotes from the Bible as she kneels on the floor, some scripture about be fruitful and multiply and obedience and some shit like that. Then the commander's wife sits back on the bed and receives the handmaid into her lap backward, so that they are now functioning as one body. And the wife is trying to be an extension of the recipient of the commander's seed. The handmaid is in the middle, but she really does not exist. She is a vessel. And so the wife leans back, grabs the handmaiden by the hands, and the handmaiden is essentially raped by the commander. The sex itself is dispassionate, it's formal, it's cold, it's calculated. This is ceremonialized rape. In chapter 6 of Margaret Atwood's novel, she talks about the process from the first-person perspective of the handmaid. She says this, quote, "My red skirt is hitched up to my waist, though no higher. Below it, the commander is fucking. What he is fucking is the lower part of my body. I do not say making love because this is not what he's doing. Copulating, too, would be inaccurate because it would imply two people, and only one is involved. Nor does rape cover it. Nothing is going on here that I haven't signed up for." Now, I disagree with the second part because, you could argue that the handmaid willingly laid back on the bed to receive the commander, but only if you allow for the fact that her refusal puts her on the wall. Her refusal is a death sentence. She is executed. The rape is trussed up in the language of duty and the privilege of being God's vessel. You have been chosen for this divine moment, but it's still rape. This is really the only sex allowed in this society. Human passions are seen like harmful vices. The human animal is a muted beast. It is locked inside this structure that supposedly keeps people civilized and pure. It's a Puritan culture. The worst of horrors are carried out like someone might carry out the garbage, drowning disobedient maidens in a swimming pool, feeding to hungry dogs any female who dares to use contraception, shooting on sights anybody who tries to escape. It's like North Korea blended with the Old Testament, laced in commentary that relates to the real world that you and I live in, and I find the show compelling and terrifying. No, we do not live in Gilead in the United States. There has been no theocratic coup per se, and we're not seeing the cross as the national symbol on the National Mall, and we haven't seen the declaration that the government is now the church. But wait, and you're already a step ahead of me. This is what great social commentary does. Great social commentary takes reality and sort of spins it in upon itself and amplifies it, puts it through the magnifying glass to show you the repercussions of what happens when this kind of thing is accepted and allowed and promoted. The social commentary of The Handmaid's Tale does remind us of some all too real world headlines in places like Bradensburg, Maryland, right? The taxpayer-owned public land that continues to host this big cross, huge Christian cross declared by our own Supreme Court as protected because, according to them, removing the cross would be an attack on religion. We've seen witnesses to the daily bleeding of religion over the constitutional church-state line, with the theocrats saying that their God owns the country, their God owns the people, their God owns the Constitution, their God owns the halls of power, and they warn about punishment for noncompliance to their God and his wishes. Jesus Christ, we're seeing this every freaking day. We're seeing everybody from Paula White to Franklin Graham to James Dobson to hell, Jim Baker and those batshit crazy people. We are seeing the state of Alabama almost absolutely strip women of their bodily autonomy, making abortion illegal, even in the case of rape and incest. In May of this year, Alabama Governor Kay Ivey signed into law a bill that could punish abortion doctors with life in prison. Her rationale was religious rationale. This is a quote. "This legislation stands as a powerful testament to Alabamians' deeply held belief that every life is precious and that every life is a sacred gift from God." Now tell me this isn't at least a shade of The Handmaid's Tale. Every life is precious. Every life is a gift from God. We now take away the rights of the woman in regard to her own body. We, the state, make a determination that every baby must be carried to term with very, very, very few exceptions. And if anyone intervenes in this process, they face severe consequences, potentially life in prison. Now, in a scene worthy of The Handmaid's Tale, that bill, the abortion bill in Alabama, was passed by a Republican-led Senate 25-6. Guess what gender all 25 were? All 25 yes votes were passed by men. We're seeing the discrimination of and violence against non-heterosexuals. Their attackers so often using what? Religious rationalizations for bigotry and hatred. The placards read, "Homosexuality is an abomination to God Almighty." This is the kind of language they use. The Bible says God gave them up unto their vile affections. The signs say homosexuals are possessed by demons. Storefront signs say heterosexuals only. In the year 2019, this has been the case. And the declaring that only one type of relationship, only one type of marital union is an acceptable one man, one woman. Under these guidelines, we see the prayers and posturing out of the White House, the highest halls of power, evangelist at the inauguration ceremony, blessing the ceremony, blessing the crowd, blessing the occasion, the inevitable invocations of God from all the podiums. God will help us. God has given us this moment. God has placed us in this role of power. God will reward us. God may judge us. God may especially judge you. I speak for God, and you should do what I say because I am God's proxy. Margaret Atwood's story is an extreme story. But, sometimes the human condition is extreme. After all, Gilead is no more horrifying than our real-world, modern-day, 21st century North Korea, a place that Christopher Hitchens rightly called a theocracy because Kim Jong-un is considered as a god, as is his dead father. And Kim Jong-un is terrifying. He's throttled the entire country into this fear culture that you and I probably really can't even imagine. Death squads, public executions, concentration camps, persecution for free thought and free action, enslavement, rape, deliberate starvation of his people, constant mind control, the assassination of political enemies, even when those enemies are on the family tree. I'm reminded of the story of Kim Jong-un's uncle, Jang Zon-thek, convicted of treason. Kim had his uncle shredded with anti-aircraft guns. That's how he had him killed. And then he torched the remains with flamethrowers to send a message. We see in that case, art has indeed imitated life, not the other way around. And the reason I'm talking about The Handmaid's Tale today is that I do want to explore the social commentary aspect of it, the human rights aspect of it, and to hear the parallels you see when you read the daily headlines here in the United States and around the world. On one hand, we're seeing the rise of the nuns, the non-religious, those who reject all of this theocratic babble, this Bible babble, a statistical rejection of religion, even here in the United States. I mean, the 30 and unders are more every day walking away from religion. But at the same time, on the other hand, we are seeing power players, major power players that are invoking God to consolidate their power and strip others of their own humanity. The immigrant, the non-white, the non-Christian, the non-heterosexual. What are your thoughts and opinions on The Handmaid's Tale? What do you think? There's a documentary that just released on Netflix everybody's talking about. I have yet to see it. I plan to watch very, very soon. It's called The Family. And it apparently gets very detailed into how Christian privilege, Christian nationalism has funded and propelled and supported and enjoyed preferential treatment from the United States government. And so, that's the only sell I really needed to hear. Once I heard what it was about, we're going to go and I'm definitely going to crank it up and check it out. It's called The Family on Netflix. Anyway, that's the basic setup for The Handmaid's Tale. Now I'd like to hear what you have to say about it. I've got a call on Skype. You are on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Hi. Who's this?
It's Rosemary.
What are your thoughts? Do you watch The Handmaid's Tale, and what do you think?
I can't watch it. It makes my blood boil. It's so true to life over there in America, in certain states, that I just get so angry. I like the film, though. I like, it was made in about 1990, and I think it was Vanessa Redgrave's daughter who was in it. But it was the whole book, the whole film. And it had the ending to it, which was really good. But the series, because it's sort of like drawn out, I still couldn't watch it.
I remember the film vaguely. I think not Robert De Niro. Robert Duvall. Oh, God, it's going to drive me crazy.
Yes.
Robert Duvall, I know, played the commander in the film. And I don't remember much about it. I think that the HULU television series is much darker and goes much deeper into the psychology. But I look around me and I think, a lot of times fiction is a great way to make commentary on fact. And so is the Handmaid's Tale and what it depicts, this theocracy, this sort of God and country. We excuse everything we do in the name of God. It's obviously an exaggeration of the truth, but there's a hell of a lot of truth in it. So it's good television. You ought to go back and give it another shot.
It's on Netflix, so I don't have Netflix.
Oh, it's on HULU, actually.
I just like I said, I can't watch it anyway, because when I think I watched the very first one where she was held down by the wife and then raped by her husband, and I just thought, no, I can't watch it. It made me angry. It made me my blood boil. And then in certain states like Alabama, and the way that 6 weeks for a woman who's pregnant, who knows they're pregnant at 6 weeks, and no abortion. And then I think it was yesterday, I saw an article on a 10-year-old girl who was raped by her uncle, and they were debating whether she should be allowed an abortion because her body was too young to actually go full term. On one hand, if she has an abortion. On the other hand, if she actually gives birth, she could die. And that just really sort of like brought it all home, Well,
maybe it's a good thing it's not available. Maybe the blood pressure just...
No.
Yeah, maybe. We don't want you stressed out, Rosemary. We don't want you to hit the ceiling. So, all right. Well, I appreciate you, and I appreciate your kind heart and your perspective on all this. Thanks for watching and listening, okay?
Oh, okay. Can I just say hello to my Gaming Bradley friends? It's Jeff, Kristen, Biddy, Kelly, Amanda. We all watch you, die every time you work game.
Watch me die horribly on my gaming channel. Yeah, well, Foxhole brothers and sisters, we are.
We are. Yeah. We are.
All right, a big shout out to the Gaming Badly crew, and you take care of yourself, all right?
And you. Bye-bye.
And I remember I'm a huge Trekkie, especially for the original series and Next Generation. I've listened to it must have been a 40 or 50 hour audiobook called The 50-Year Mission, which was a comprehensive chronicling of the last 50 years of Star Trek. And they were getting into social commentary and science fiction and how Gene Roddenberry was a humanist, and he had all of these things he wanted to say about the culture at large, racism, sexism, the Vietnam War. But the censors at the networks would not allow them to do anything too quote-unquote controversial. So what he did was he hid, in plain sight, he hid social commentary in the stories of Star Trek, which was really, with I think one exception where God is invoked, a humanistic show. I'm mostly reminded of the Alien Race, where one was black on the left side, white on the right, and the other was white on the left side, black on the right. And even though they were really identical, they were the same species, really, with one tiny, tiny, tiny difference. They despised each other. They were tribes against each other. And he used those kind of plot devices to make commentary on the human condition. I just thought it was interesting. Area code 307, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Hi, who's this?
Oh my gosh, I can't believe you answered my call. This is Michelle.
Michelle, I can't believe you called. I'm glad you did. What's going on in your world?
Not a whole lot. I actually got to see you. I live in Lincoln, Nebraska, although I have a 307 area code. I'm from Wyoming.
Yeah, I just spoke there.
Yeah, I got to I went and saw you speak, and it was pretty awesome. So thanks for coming out to Lincoln.
That's new material that I've been doing around the country, and I'm nervous. You saw the speech. We talk a lot about how we tend to vilify other people in the Twitterverse, And I was wondering if everybody would go for it and how the response would be, but the audience seemed really ready for that material. I mean, did you have any comment on it?
I think it was a really great message, honestly. I just feel like, honestly, I kind of went off social media because I felt like I need to remember and believe that my grandma who loves Donald Trump is a wonderful person. And sometimes I feel like we get so, enraged constantly just by the garbage that people share. I thought it was a very needed message, especially going into the whole election season and just remembering that, I don't remember the exact description, but you hear that sort of mental image that, we have the left wing and the right wing, but we're all the same bird, basically. We're all the same country. And I think sometimes we forget that,
Yeah. I want to make sure everybody, I'm not saying our values are the same. I'm just saying that if we only speak about people in extremes, no one's minds are ever changed. Anyway, you'll see the speech on the internet later. I didn't mean to derail. Well, I wasn't fishing for compliments. Mostly I was taking your temperature. Okay. I was relying on you to be honest with me. Do you watch The Handmaid's Tale?
I watch it every week, and I'm so annoyed that they won't just release the entire season. It drives me crazy. So every Wednesday night after work, I, get myself in front of the TV and watch it. It is insane, and it makes me have a hard time sleeping at night, honestly.
Is it one of those, do you experience this? It's almost like the showrunners have hired me to promote the show, but it's relevant. People are talking about it, so let's talk about it. But we start the show with anticipation. But by the time the credit rolls at the end, we're exhausted emotionally, physically. We feel like we just ran the gauntlet and we just want to go sit somewhere and just breathe. Do you feel that at the end of each episode?
Yeah, especially this last one. I won't spoil it for people, but I mean, it's starting to finally get somewhere. I feel like this whole season's kind of been building up slowly, and finally we're kind of getting to the point where, we're in a situation where the revolution is starting to kind of happen, which is really awesome. I feel like the show, I have to remind myself constantly that it's just fiction, but, I started watching it. I hadn't been watching it prior, and some coworkers had recommended it to me, and I started watching it during the Kavanaugh hearings, and I just felt like that was such a bizarre time to start watching it and realizing how, we've come so far in this country with women's rights, but still, a woman is just not taken seriously the same way that men are, and watching Handmaids at the same time as that whole thing was just like mind-blowing. So I don't know. I think it's a good thing for women to watch. I think just to not fall asleep and not forget that, how hard all of the freedom that we have right now was fought, but how easily it seems like some of those things are being taken from us.
I was talking about The Handmaid's Tale on Twitter, and there are a lot of guys who are like me who are hooked, and then there are a lot of guys who are just pissed off. One of the people who was protesting called it feminist porn, and how that men are really the victims, women simply play the victim, and this show is, it's sort of a self-gratification exercise for women, as they have so much more power than they would ever let on. His take is that it's all bullshit, and the equality between the genders has been achieved, and the show is just propaganda to help serve the feminist narrative. If you hear that, what are your thoughts and comments?
I mean, my question would be, is this comment coming from a white, cis, straight male? I mean, honestly, it's just kind of, I'm from Wyoming, so I feel like most guys that I grew up around probably are disgusted by feminism. They don't understand it. And ironically, being from Wyoming, the first state that allowed women to vote, strangely enough, the conservative values run pretty deep. And I feel like a lot of that anti-feminism sort of propaganda, as you will, I don't know how to describe that.
I get it. Yeah, the anti-feminism narrative out there.
Yeah, it's kind of like it comes from a place of perhaps people who kind of have the whole Christian family thing. Like, I used to be Lutheran, and I feel like, the way it was taught to me is that Christ is the head of the church, the husband is the head of the house, the wife serves the husband, and the children are below them. And so I feel like there's this whole thing where, they're working together for the common good, but they're not equals in that particular hierarchy. So it's kind of, personally, the people that I know that are anti-feminism, they love women, but they revere them rather than seeing them as an equal, if that makes sense.
I see two things. One is there are many people who they hear the word feminism, and that's like a trigger for them to lose their freaking minds. And now they spin off into oblivion. And I'm like, let's just draw back. Everybody take your pill, take your chill pill,
right.
Enhance your calm, align your chakras. Let's just chill for a second and say that let's go back to the pure definition, which is essentially equality of women to men, equality between the genders. And that's still a laudable goal. It's still something that we should desperately seek, equality and respect between the genders. Secondly, I see, and you mentioned this in the church, that there is a proud narrative that women are subservient by nature. They are helpers by nature,
right.
And therefore they sort of stand under the authority of the man as part of God's design. And I have met a great many religious women who are delighted about this. Like, I would expect them to be like, this sucks.
Oh, absolutely.
And instead they were like, no, I'm happy to let him make the decisions and he makes the money and I just kind of do my thing because that's what God wants me to. He just wants me to support my husband. And of course I'm about to come out of my skin going, you have one life,
right.
Don't be somebody else's echo, be your own voice.
Oh, I tell you what, I tried. I took a step back from religion for about 8 years. I mean, not necessarily consciously, I guess. I was raised in an incredibly fundamentalist home. Went to college, got married, just stepped away from religion for a while, and then decided to kind of crawl back. And I crawled into this really conservative sect of Lutheranism. And I, at heart, have just been a bleeding heart liberal. I mean, I can't do it. I can't.
Lutherans
I can't do
is
that
conservative anyway. You mean conservative in relation to the other Lutherans? Because that's pretty hardcore. You were like a mannequin.
Like LCMS, like Missouri Synod. Yeah, like super conservative. And then I realized I got confirmed and everything, and I was like, you know what? After a year of that, I was like, I just can't sit through these sermons. I can't sit here. I can't do this. I don't think I'm looking back.
You were liberated from Gilead, and now you are free.
I really was. And that's the weird thing is with the Lutherans. I mean, I love Lutherans. They're wonderful people. But, yeah, it just wasn't my thing, I guess. I couldn't make myself believe the earth is, they're young earth creationists. They say that homosexuality is an abomination, and like my pastor required me to say that, and I said it, and then I was like, I don't actually believe that. I just think you don't want to believe that these other people exist in the world and it's normal and it's the way they are, So
it's very Handmaid's Tale. It really is. And I was honored to meet you in Lincoln, and it's great to talk to you now. Thanks for your perspective, and have a wonderful day, okay?
Hey, thank you, Seth. You too. Thank you so much.
Catch you later. Short break. When I come back, we talk more about The Handmaid's Tale, and we take more of your calls in just a second. Hang on. Let me tell you about a secret weapon for learning new things and getting ahead. Free time being at a premium, and yet Blinkist is an incredible app that solves the time problem. It brings back the joy of reading into our lives. Blinkist works on your phone, your tablet, your web browser, taking the best key takeaways, the need-to-know information from thousands of nonfiction books, and condenses them down to about 15 minutes per book. You can read the book or listen to the audiobook. Either way, massively helpful for people on the go, people who want the main points, the biggest ideas, the essentials from books on science, history, business, self-help, whatever. 8 million people are using Blinkist right now. now, and I'm one of them. I love the book by futurist Jamie Metzl. It's called Hacking Darwin, Genetic Engineering and the Future of Humanity. Tapping into our own genetic machine and the possibilities that come with all that. I listened to the entire Blinkist version of the audiobook on one 15-minute drive. And they have other great titles in their most read category. They've got Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence, or Michelle Obama's Becoming. With Blinkist, you get unlimited access to read or listen to a massive library of condensed nonfiction books, all the books you want, and all for one low price. And right now, for a limited time, Blinkist has a special offer just for our audience. Go to Blinkist.com/Seth to try it free for 7 days and save 25% off your new subscription. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist, Blinkist.com/Seth to start your free 7-day trial. And you'll also save 25% off, but only when you sign up at Blinkist.com/Seth. My patrons get this broadcast early, and they get it totally commercial-free. And if you'd like to become a patron, the website is patreon.com/Seth Andrews. Interesting to see the biblical parallels, Christian faith and the television show and the book The Handmaid's Tale. Of course, we're talking about Margaret Atwood's work. Going back to the book of Ephesians, Chapter 5, verse 22 through 24 talks about how wives are supposed to submit to their husbands. The woman submits to the male. 1 Timothy 2 talks about women learning in quietness and full submission. I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man. She must be silent. 1 Corinthians has plenty of verses about women. Chapter 14, verses 33 and 35 talk about women being silent in the churches. Keep your women silent in church. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 says that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of woman is man. Colossians 3:18, wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Same thing in Peter chapter 3. Titus chapter 2 says they can train the younger women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled and pure, to be busy at home, to be kind, and to be subject to their husbands. The Handmaid's Tale takes a very hard line on non-heterosexuals, and we look in the book of Leviticus, right? Homosexual acts are called an abomination to God in chapter 18. Chapter 20, verse 13 says that if a man has sex with another man, kill them both. Romans talks about evildoers, backbiters, the haters of God, the despiteful, the proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, the disobedient, covenant breakers, and those without, quote, natural affection, meaning the non-heterosexual. Romans 1:32. They that commit such things are worthy of death. And you can already see the parallels. You can already see the connection. The Handmaid's Tale representing the Old Testament as borne out in modern day. How many atrocious acts, how many wars, how much subjugation of other people has been excused and rationalized in the name of God throughout human history. And in the case of the work of Margaret Atwood that we're talking about today, how can we use speculative fiction about a dystopian theocratic future? How can we use that to address Christian privilege and religious discrimination and oppression here in the 21st century? I want to hear what you think. 416, you are on the Thinking Atheist podcast.
Hi, Seth. How are you? It's Mike. How are you?
Mike, what's going on?
I don't know that the United States will ever get to a point of like The Handmaid's Tale. I'm very skeptical about something that radical. With that said, I watched the first episode. You were talking about the family earlier. I watched the first episode just last night, and I found it very disturbing. And I think that what will happen is, as the non-religious, who are in third place in the world right now in terms of numbers, as they start creeping up and becoming more and more in numbers, I think that these people like the fellowship or the family or however you want to call them are going to do their biggest push forward the best that they can. And that's the part that scares me. Do you know what I mean?
Is it that while they have power, they're going to push as hard as they can to maximize on that time period?
Absolutely. And you know what I think? The disturbing thing to me is that now is their time with people like, I'm about as liberal as you are. And with people like Mike Pence and Donald Trump in power, this is the time that they're going to make that biggest push forward. I was born and raised as a Seventh-day Adventist, like your friend. You're friends with Ryan Bell, right?
Yeah, I know Ryan.
Like him, I grew up as a Seventh-day Adventist and very, very secluded. It was all nice, but now I've been an atheist for almost 20 years. I look back on something like The Handmaid's Tale or the Family Show, and it reminds me of how it used to be. And I think I think there's going to be one last push for it, and I think now's the time with Mike Pence and Donald Trump.
And it shows how critical it is for people not to be passive, but to be active, involved, to be a part of the mechanism to prevent this privilege from doing real and permanent damage. Well, it's already done real and I think in many ways permanent damage, but you know what I mean, right?
Well, so absolutely. And the thing that, I'm calling from Canada. The thing that's, incidentally, Margaret Atwood, the writer of The Handmaid's Tale, is from Toronto here. I've had breakfast with her a few times. But in any event, in Canada and the rest of the world, with 50% of America and the whole rest of the world, we are looking at what's going on in the United States with awe. We cannot believe that they are neck and neck, the Dems and the Repubs. They're neck and neck. I just don't understand that. I've never seen a bigger monkey in power, and he still has support. I don't get it.
Yeah.
The whole world does. I'll tell you right now, the whole world doesn't get it.
You must wonder that the entire country's lost its mind. Just please remember those of us who are fugitives in our own land, who are desperately trying to we apologize.
Well,
Look, to the rest of the world. We're sorry. We don't know what happened. We're working as hard as we can to fix it.
Yeah, no, it's not. When my family came from where my wife's laughing here, when my family came to the New World, as it were, they stopped in a place called Hamilton, Ontario, and then they moved on to Chicago. But my mother met my biological sperm donor at the time, and I was born here. So, very differently than a lot of Canadians, I have a multitude of family, first cousins that are born and bred Americans. So I'm in the Chicago area every a couple times a year, and believe me, I know what you're talking about. The majority of American, the really hardcore right core Christian right, are small numbers.
Well, I mean, they're big. They're major and influential numbers. They just, I always, maybe I'm being, what's the word? Maybe I'm self-conscious. I desperately want someone to know that we're not all insane. There are a few of us left, and we love our country. We want to see it fixed. We look around and wonder what's happening to our world. The insanity keeps us up at night. We know how critical the 2020 elections are. We see the theocrats all around us, and they're terrifying. And what's more terrifying is their base. One thing that I find utility with coming out of the religious right in this country, and that is that the last several years of showing the absolute hypocrisy, them working in contradiction to the tenets of their own faith, the verses of their own Bible.
Absolutely.
To see them completely, obviously working only for power and self-interest has exposed the dark underbelly of the religious right. That's the only one positive I've been taking out of the last several years.
Yeah.
We actually all know that, and it's been actually a relief for those of us who are transitioning.
Oh.
This is Mike's wife.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, Mike, hey, pal. you got to give me a warning. You know what I'm saying?
That's his alter ego.
Well, we both.
No, it's a relief to see the true hypocrisy, because I grew up, my father worked for 700 Club. What's his name? Pat. What's his name?
700 Club.
Yeah.
Pat Robertson.
Oh, yeah. Yes. So it's to see all of the hypocrisy exposed actually helps the final little steps to not having those moments where I think, maybe maybe it's not true.
It was former Republican chair Michael Steele who said it right. He said the Republicans have lost, the evangelicals have lost all right to ever tell anybody else how to live their life ever. And I'm paraphrasing, but
most
that's
definitely.
Now, tell me your name.
My name is Sheila.
Sheila, tell me about this breakfast with your husband's just hanging out with Margaret Atwood. What the hell? What's going on there?
Oh, yeah. That was before I knew him.
Yeah, that was
downtown Bay Street boy.
Bay Street boy. Yeah, she lives downtown in a very posh neighborhood. It wasn't. I'll be honest. I didn't actually have breakfast. Like, I didn't sit at the table with her having breakfast. But this cafe that I used to go to for brunch a lot, she comes every weekend for brunch. And now it's closed, so I don't know where she goes now for brunch. But I would see her all the time, and a couple of times I was sitting like directly beside her, and I just thought that was the coolest thing.
I'm totally doing that. I'm going to go sit in the table adjacent to a celebrity, and then I'm going to go on the radio and be like, yeah, Brad Pitt and I had breakfast the other day, and we were just hanging. And
I want to tell you something, Seth.
Okay.
My wife and I both come from very fundamentalist backgrounds. As I told you, I was Seventh-day Adventist. She was Baptist. You and I are about the same age, eh? And like you, I believed that donkeys could talk until my early 30s. And today, or rather at that time, I entered the ministry to be a pastor. For 2 years, I was in the ministry to be a pastor, and I did little mini sermons and things like that. With that said, my wife and I love you and Natalie. We think you guys are so awesome, and we always talk about how cool it would be if we were ever in Oklahoma to go visit you guys,
Oh, wow. We love that.
We cried along with you with your puppy.
Oh.
Yes, we cried for Henry and Rat Dog.
Did you see the Henry van?
Oh, we love it.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
It's funny,
we watch you every night.
We still think about them. I guess this is normal, but something will trigger a memory, and then you kind of get maudlin, and then you have a happy memory, and then you punish yourself for thinking about it too much, and then you focus on, then we focus on Linus, and I guess that's common for people who've lost beloved animals. But thank you for that.
Yeah, but don't punish yourself, because Henry and Rat Dog deserve your tears.
They were very special, very special. And you two have just made my day. Thank you for the kind words. If I'm ever in your neck of the woods or you're in mine, I'm buying. I don't know what I'm buying, but I'm buying.
You come to Toronto a lot, don't you?
Not a lot, but I've been there for some conventions and conferences, and I'm sure I'll be back. And if I am, let's try to rendezvous.
Well,
okay.
Me and Sheila will take you out to some of the sweetest little cafes, patio cafes. There's a lot of culture in this town.
Can we sit at the same table, or do we have to sit in separate tables? And then you say, "Hey, I had breakfast with Seth."
Well, you're the celebrity, so you can.
All right, big hugs to you both.
Every night, by the way, every night.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that, and I hope to see you in Toronto one day soon. Okay.
That sounds wonderful. You have a good day.
Thank you much. Take care. Oh wow, what a privilege that is to be able to hear that. Thank you for the kind words. The theme of the broadcast is The Handmaid's Tale. Could it happen here? And I wanted to get back to the actual source material for just a few. Random House Publishing has excerpts, actually several of them, on the book's promotional page or whatever that sort of describes the world that they live in. June is the protagonist. She is the main character in The Handmaid's Tale. And she's talking about the environment that she has been thrust into along with all these other handmaids. And I'll just read this excerpt from The Handmaid's Tale. It says, "We slept in what had once been the gymnasium. The floor was of varnished wood with stripes and circles painted on it for the games that were formerly played there. The hoops for the basketball nets were still in place, although the nets were gone. A balcony ran around the room for the spectators, and I thought I could smell faintly like an after-image the pungent scent of sweat, shot through with the sweet taint of chewing gum and perfume from the watching girls, felt skirted, as I knew from pictures, later in miniskirts, then pants, then in one earring, spiky, green-streaked hair. Dances would have been held there, the music lingered, a palimpsest of unheard sounds, style upon style, an undercurrent of drums, a forlorn wail, garlands made of tissue paper flowers, cardboard devils, a revolving ball of mirrors, powdering the dancers with a snow of light. There was old sex in the room, and loneliness and expectation of something without a shape or name. I remember that yearning for something that was always about to happen and was never the same as the hands that were on us there and then, in the small of the back, or out back, in the parking lot, or in the television room with the sound turned down, and only the pictures flickering over lifting flesh. We yearned for the future. How did we learn it, that talent for insatiability? It was in the air, and it was still in the air, an afterthought as we tried to sleep in the army cots that had been set up in rows, with spaces between so we could not talk. We had flannelette sheets like children's, and army-issue blankets, old ones that still said U.S., We folded our clothes neatly and laid them on the stools at the end of the beds. The lights were turned down, but not out. Aunt Sarah and Aunt Elizabeth patrolled. They had electric cattle prods slung on thongs from their leather belts. No guns, though. Even they could not be trusted with guns. Guns were for the guards, specially picked from the angels. The guards weren't allowed inside the building except when called, and we weren't allowed out except for our walks, twice daily, 2 by 2, around the football field, which was enclosed now by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. The angels stood outside it with their backs to us. They were objects of fear to us, but of something else as well. If only they would look, if only we could talk to them. Something could be exchanged, we thought, some deal made, some trade-off. We still had our bodies. That was our fantasy. We learned to whisper almost without sound. In the semi-darkness, we could stretch out our arms when the ants weren't looking and touch each other's hands across space. We learned to lip-read, our heads flat on the beds, turned sideways, watching each other's mouths. In this way, we exchanged names from bed to bed. Alma, Janine, Dolores, Moira, June. There's a line elsewhere in the book that probably sums up this entire scenario as well as any. It says this. It says, "A rat in a maze is free to go anywhere as long as it stays inside the maze." I talk a little bit in my book, Deconverted, about how in church terminology we dress up our cathedrals with stained glass and beautiful decor, but the truth is, in many ways, they are still prisons, at least prisons for the mind. Well-adorned, well-decorated, beautiful prisons that we're supposed to treat like home, even as these structures act for the housing that facilitates our own enslavement. Anyway, I encourage you to read the book and watch the show. They're both fantastic. I've got another call. Let's take one more. 850. You're so patient. Thanks so much for calling the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Hey, Seth. This is Stephanie in Pensacola. How are you?
I'm good, Stephanie. You watch The Handmaid's Tale? Because I'm all worked up about it. And now I've got to wait another, 2 years or something till season 4? It seems to be longer and longer between seasons these days. But what do you think?
I don't know. I feel like I need time to recover, maybe.
Too stressful, huh?
Yeah, I'm really glad you're talking about it today, though, because me and my significant other just finished watching it. And I'd actually like to talk to you about a specific moment, if that's okay. I guess it would be considered a spoiler.
Yeah. No, I've given everybody
not,
the spoiler warnings. Let's talk. Let's get specific.
Okay, thank you. So there is a moment in the episode where June is speaking to a little girl. I don't think we learn her name. But she's speaking to her basically about the free world. And the little girl is basically, asking her, if I am free, if I make these choices that you say I can make, will I still be loved, basically? And for me personally, that moment really stuck out to me. And I just watching her and hearing her say those words, tears just started streaming down my face immediately during that scene. Because I guess even though I'm one of those people you mentioned before about, I guess I'd kind of like to say I'm a lifelong atheist, but there was a short period in my childhood where I did believe in God, and where I did go through a phase of, worrying about would I be accepted. And I guess that just made me think about the fact that I have so much to appreciate now, that I ended up being accepted by my parents, and I have a significant other now who accepts me and who agrees with me on all that kind of stuff. And for a while, just similarly to that little girl, I didn't think that I would be accepted, whether it was by God or whether it was by potential friends.
I knew a family who went to a little church in Oklahoma, and one of the sermons was about all the stuff that we as humans don't deserve. You don't deserve happiness. You see those TV commercials and they're like, you deserve the very best. And the pastor was telling everybody, no, you don't. You don't deserve happiness. You don't deserve the best. You don't deserve anything. In fact, you deserve hell, sort of thing. And it teaches that we are unworthy of all the good stuff that life has to offer. And you can easily picture with that little girl, somebody who was raised in that kind of a culture, or someone who was brainwashed under the totalitarian rule of North Korea, who has no idea how they would even express themselves in a free environment, saying things like, could I wear the clothes I want? Could I cross this line? Could I walk outside without getting permission? Could I fall in love? Could I be whoever I am? Expressing that however they express it. I think it's easy to see that reflected as fiction in the real world. And I agree, it's that moment alone is probably worth the whole episode.
Yeah, I definitely had a strong reaction to it because I basically knew that I was an atheist by the time that I was, I guess, like, I didn't know the word yet, but I knew what I believed basically by the time that I was like 7. I basically ended up equating it to Santa Claus after a while. I was sort of raised, I like to say I was raised half Catholic because my dad was the one that was kind of enforcing it because it was his family tradition. So he was just trying to carry that on and have me be part of the local community because we were moving around because I was in a military family. So that was just kind of something to, keep me doing. But fortunately, I had I have a dad that I can talk to about politics and religion and pretty much anything. But unfortunately, I didn't know that. Of course, I was scared at first. And I had been going to CCD, the Catholic Bible School for Kids, basically, for a few years. And it was just depressing and confusing because after a while, I realized I didn't believe in any of it. So I was just like, what am I doing here? This is all... it was just frustrating. And eventually, one day after I went to a class, I was able to tell him. And I was really, really scared, but he basically ended up just saying, like, oh okay, sweetie, I'm not going to make you go if you don't really want to. I'm not going to make you do that anymore. You've done it for a while, and so I think you've given it a shot, basically.
I want to shake his hand. That's awesome. And you were 7?
Well, okay, that conversation didn't happen until I was, I think I was 10,
okay.
9 or 10 when that conversation happened.
I'm just listening to you with jealousy.
Like 6.
I'm just sitting over here being jealous because I was 37 before I started to have any real courage to attack what I was thinking and why, and to do any sort of self-evaluation in any meaningful way. And the fact that you did it before you were old enough to drive is, to me, just an awesome thing. And I'm happy for you, and I'm glad for you, and I appreciate your opinion. And I'm glad for your perspective as well. So, was there anything else you wanted to throw out?
I just wanted to thank you because I'm not trying to brag, but I do appreciate what you had to say. I'm just thankful to be a part of communities like yours because even though, like you said, I guess I quote unquote figured it out at that age, but I felt alienated, and I still do sometimes, but I kept it inside for so long because even though I basically asked not to go to church anymore, I wasn't totally out about all these things that were included in that. But because of people like you and shows like yours, I was able to slowly gain confidence. I think I started listening to a podcast called Atheist News when I was towards the end of elementary school. I found it. And that was when I first found that word. And I was like, okay, I'm not crazy and I'm not alone. This is a thing. And so I'm just so excited for all the young people that are in that same position right now that have all these resources. So you're awesome.
Well, you're very kind. I consider you family, and you got family all over the world right now, and you're part of a generation that is seeing a sea change despite our challenges. We are part of an actual sea change here in the this part of the world, and I think affecting the globe in general. And who knows what the world's going to look like in a few decades, but we got to keep kicking. So all my best to you and yours, and thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Seth.
All right. Take care. Let's call it a night. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks so much for being a part of this community, for the kind words as we continue to battle against Christian privilege, religious privilege in general. The theocrats want to own all the good stuff in this world. We say absolutely not. This is not a religious party. This is a human one, and we'll continue to sort of pound that drum. Have a wonderful night. See you later.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter for a complete archive of podcasts and videos, products like mugs and t-shirts featuring the Thinking Atheist logo, links to atheist pages and resources, and details on upcoming free thought events and conventions. Log on to our website, thethinkingatheist.com.